Welcome back to Low Carbon Lifestyle. There are loads of new terms around electric vehicles that don't make a lot of sense unless you have a good read and research, or if you're from a science or engineering background like me. So for this video, I'll try to explain some of the jargon around electric vehicles. My name is Tom, and this is a little series about a low carbon lifestyle. So let's start with power. What is the unit of power? That's not a question. A watt is how much power an electric motor can put into the wheels at any moment. For a long time we've measured that unit in horsepower, which comes from a Scottish engineer called James Watt. And James Watt used to compare different steam engines to the power of a horse. So there we go, that standard unit for power was named after James Watt. 1 horsepower is about 745 James watts, 745 watts. 0.745 kilowatts, which means 1000 watts, like kilograms and grams. We really should just use kilowatts when we're talking about power, but horsepower tends to be a bigger number, or it is a bigger number, which makes us feel strong and powerful, and those petrol heads mentioning no names tend to want to feel stronger and more powerful. So we keep talking in horsepower, but kilowatts is the key one. That's what we need to know. So for some examples of electric vehicles, what's their maximum power? What's the electric motor's maximum power? A brand new Renault Zoe, a little car, that comes with either an 80 kilowatt or a 100 kilowatt motor, which would be about 108 to 135 horsepower. A brand new VW ID3 has a 150 kilowatt motor, and that'll be about 201 horsepower. Let's get a bit bigger. A brand new Porsche Taycan has up to a 420 kilowatt motor. That's huge, which would be about 563 horses. Wow, like a Guinness advert. A brand new Tesla Model S Plaid has a 760 kilowatt motor, which would be over 1000 horsepower, and a little bit silly and not really that needed. So the rating of the motor basically tells you how quickly a vehicle can accelerate. For most of us, this is pretty irrelevant, and the little Renault Zoe with the little motor, 80 to 100 kilowatts, would feel really quick. So if we use that certain amount of power for a period of time, we use energy. So energy is power multiplied by time. So a 100 kilowatt motor, like in the Zoe, running at that max power, i.e. foot flat to the floor, for 1 minute would use 6 kilojoules, 6,000 joules of energy. We don't tend to use kilojoules in how we measure energy in electric vehicles, but kilowatt hours. Both are units of energy, but a kilowatt hour is 3.6 million joules. The conversion simply is 1 joule times 1000 for the kilo in kilowatt, and then 3600, or the number of seconds in an hour. So if we run an electric motor for a certain amount of time, we use a certain amount of energy, and that's in kilowatt hours. And we measure battery sizes in that same amount of energy in kilowatt hours. The original Nissan Leaf had a battery size of 24 kilowatt hours. Many electric vehicles today have about double that. Some have over 100 kilowatt hours. And this is just like the energy stored in a fuel tank. 1 litre of petrol contains almost 10 kilowatt hours of energy. So my Nissan Pulsar, which has a 46 litre tank, stores about 460 kilowatt hours of energy. That's huge. That's more than any electric vehicle, but it's not what it's made out to be, so more on that later. A really quick side note, because we drove one, but BMW in their electric vehicles, they measure battery capacity in a slightly different way. They use amp hours, which is the amount of current in amps supplied for an amount of time. And if you come with me on a little journey back down memory lane to A-level physics, you may remember that power equals current, amps, times voltage, volts. So if we know the voltage of a BMW, we can work out the power and therefore energy of the motor and battery. Turns out the motor is 400 volts and 3 phases, so a slightly different formula. And power equals the square root of 3 times I, current times voltage, times the cosine of the angle between the phases. So P equals 1.7 times 120 amp hours times 400 times 0.5, which is about 41, 42 kilowatt hours. I'm not 100% sure why BMW rate it in that way, but a BMW i3 120 amp hours is about 42 kilowatt hour battery. Okay, so we've got power that an electric vehicle uses, we've got the energy stored in the battery. How does that compare to a petrol car? In a petrol car, we tend to talk about efficiency in miles per gallon. So the petrol pulsar that I talked about earlier averages between 45 and 50 miles per gallon, or 10 or 11 miles per litre. If 1 litre of petrol stores about 10 kilowatt hours of energy, that would be about 1 mile per kilowatt hour. An electric vehicle can be quite a bit more efficient. Even big chunky EVs will have an efficiency of about 3 miles per kilowatt hour. Little lightweight, nimble or aerodynamic electric vehicles could be more than 5 miles per kilowatt hour. So in utilising energy from a tank or battery and pushing it through to movement on the ground, an electric vehicle can be 3 to 5 times more efficient than a petrol or diesel car. So those petrol and diesel vehicles, we talk about efficiency in miles per gallon of fuel, and fairly awkwardly, the industry standard for electric vehicles is kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres. I tend to revert back to about 4 miles per kilowatt hour for electric vehicles, if that's any help. Just remember that. A good efficiency is about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. Okay, we've done power of an electric motor, we've done energy in a battery, we've done efficiency. So what about charging? How quickly can we fill up a battery? We've talked a bit about power and energy already, and chargers have a similar storyline. First of all, they come with names like slow, fast, or rapid. And those names describe the amount of power that can flow through a cable and into a battery. So a slow charger would tend to be about 3 kilowatts. And that's about the same rating as a kettle in your kitchen. And that would supply a rate that basically all electric vehicles could take. And it would fill up about 3 kilowatt hours in every hour it is plugged in. And that will give you about 12 miles per hour of range, which is slow, but it's helpful. It would fill up eventually. So next we have fast chargers, which is better than slow, surely. Well, it is. Fast chargers include anything from 7 kilowatts to 22 kilowatts, and will fill up a battery by 7 to 22 kilowatt hours in an hour of charging. And that's about 25 to 88 miles of range. Great. But this is where things could start to get a little bit complicated. If these chargers are charging at an alternating current, just like the electricity that comes out of our plugs at home, they have to be transformed within the car to a direct current to fill the battery. So this is where you might see the phrase on-board charger described by an electric car, electric vehicle. Back at university, I would call that something else. I'd call it an AC to DC transformer. But electric vehicle manufacturers call them on-board chargers. And they tend to limit charging the rate of charge to about 7 or 11 kilowatts. So if you're charging from an AC charger, you will be limited by the rating on your car. But this isn't where the story ends. There are also rapid chargers, slow, fast, and then rapid. And these can charge from at least 50 kilowatts, but in direct current, so DC, from the wire. This means that they can charge a battery directly and bypass any onboard charger. A 50 kilowatt charge will give about 200 miles of range in an hour. That's pretty great. And there are even higher rated chargers, maybe ultra rapid, up to 350 kilowatts. And that would fill up a Renault Zoe battery in less than 10 minutes, if the Zoe could take a charge that quick. And actually there aren't any cars on the road at the moment that can charge at that rate yet. But there will be one day. And many now can charge about 100 to 125 kilowatts. Which is really very quick, probably much quicker than we would ever need. So they are the chargers. The chargers you'll find in the wild, in the public, are managed by a bunch of different companies, many of which will need an app to access the charger. And you'll hear a lot of people complain about the number of different apps you need to charge with. But most of the time it won't take that long to download a new app and sign up on your smartphone. And many of the chargers you will use regularly will be on the same app. So it isn't something really that you should spend time worrying about. It reminds me a little bit of when we started using Wi-Fi in public spaces. There was always another hoop to jump through before you could log in. But I can't remember now the last time that I logged into a public Wi-Fi in the UK. And charging will soon be fairly simple in a similar way. And actually already is quite simple. Most of them already accept contactless payment without logging into an app. Next, for chargers, there are slightly different types of plug. You've got CCS, or combined charging system, and that's basically used by European car manufacturers. Next you've got CHAdeMO, and that is used or was used by Nissan. Then you've got Mennekes, or Type 2, which is increasingly the standard for most cars. Some cars will even have 2 different charger types on them. It's a little bit like Apple having different cables that only work with Apple. But this used to be a big faff. Now there are adapters that will allow chargers to plug into different types of vehicle, etc, etc. So again, this is not something to worry about. The cable that you get with a car will be the right cable for your car, and it will plug into basically every plug possible. But plugging in is not the only way to refill a battery. You could charge a battery using a thing called regen, or regenerative braking. Regenerative regen is where, as you slow down, instead of wasting energy through noise or heating up brake pads and brake discs as you brake, the electric motor turns itself into a mini generator, and that mini generator charges the electric battery slightly. You'll notice it loads when you drive an electric vehicle, particularly as you drive downhill, and then you see the estimate of range ramping up as you drive. Different cars have different modes or different levels of regen that you tend to be able to change really easily whilst you're driving. And some will have such sharp regen that you can more or less just drive with one pedal. As soon as you take the foot off the accelerator, the regenerative braking kicks in, and that slows you down really quickly, and it salvages all that energy that could be wasted to brake pads. Regen's a really fun thing that you notice when you drive an electric vehicle for the first time. I think that's probably nearly everything that you need to know to explain electric vehicle jargon. I wonder if there's anything that I've missed. Is there anything else that would be really helpful to explain? Feel free to comment below with any questions. That is my 5th and final episode in my little series of Low Carbon Lifestyle Does Cars. I hope you're convinced by now that electric vehicles are accessible, are cheap to run, and can be affordable to buy. Don't let new jargon and new terms get in the way if you try and get out an electric vehicle. And do get in touch if you want to ask anything about where to start with electric vehicles. Please do check out the rest of the series on why we should drive less, on why we can buy second-hand electric vehicles, on why hiring an electric vehicle could be fun, and on why leasing an electric vehicle might be cheaper than you think.